GoForThe2.com in with the Week 10 college predictions. Let's jump right into it. Classic Big Ten battle. It's Minnesota and Michigan. Since 2011, Michigan's won 4 of the last 5 by 28 points per game. They got this victory in 2015 by a score of 29-26. You look at Michigan last week, a lackluster win at home over Rutgers. Quarterback Brandon Peters stepped in for John O'Korn. He completed 73% of his passes, 128 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. This is a Michigan offense that enters this ballgame rushing for 193 yards on the ground, passing for right in the area of about 182 yards per game. You look at this offense, they were able to run the football consistently against Rutgers. They pounded the rock for 334 yards on the ground over the last 3 games now. Michigan does have 9 rushing touchdowns, which is 3 rushing touchdowns per game. Defensively, they've been rock solid all year. They entered this ballgame holding opposing offenses to 104 rushing yards per game, only 151 passing yards through the air this season. They're holding opposing offenses to 23% on third down conversions. They held Rutgers in check, 3 of 11 on third downs last week. And if you take out that Penn State game this year, Michigan's defense has allowed 21 of 99 third down conversions, which is right in the area of 21%. They're going up against a Minnesota team that over the last couple of weeks in back-to-back games against Iowa and Illinois has only completed 14 of 44 passes, which is 31%, 186 passing yards total, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. This is back-to-back road games for Minnesota. And more importantly, you look at Michigan's defensive front. They entered this ballgame 8 games, 27 total sacks. I think that's the difference. They forced Minnesota into third down and long situations, forced Minnesota's offense to beat them over the top. Just not sold on where Minnesota is at this point in the season. And I feel Michigan is due for a breakout. I think they get a convincing 28-point victory in the Big House this coming Saturday night. They get healthy against a worn-out Minnesota team this coming Saturday. Look for a 4-touchdown win by the Wolverines in this matchup. Another intriguing ACC battle. It's a top 10 battle between Virginia Tech and Miami. Virginia Tech on the road to face the Hurricanes. Miami, since 2012, has won 3 of the last 5 by 17.3 points per game. They lost this matchup in Blacksburg last year, 37-16. Miami did not look good on the road last week against North Carolina. They struggled. Were they looking ahead to this ball game? This is a Miami offense that's balanced. They're averaging 167 rushing yards on the ground, passing for 298 through the air. This is a Miami defense as well that's playing very well, especially in pass coverage, holding opposing offenses to 197 passing yards per game. Offensively, you look at Miami over the last 3 games, they've averaged 332 passing yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. You look at Virginia Tech's defense, they've allowed 1 team to pass for over 300 yards. It came week number 1 against West Virginia and Josh Jackson. But I really think it comes down to the defense of Miami in this matchup. Over the last couple of games, they have 8 total sacks, which is 4 sacks per game, and 7 interceptions over the last couple of games. I think that really favors the secondary going up against a young, inexperienced quarterback in Josh Jackson on the road. I just think Miami's playing well right now. I know they got a gutty road win against North Carolina. They've been struggling each and every week, but they've been winning ball games. I like the secondary going up against Virginia Tech's offense. To me, that's the difference, that they're at home as well. Look for Miami to pick up a 30-20 win over the Hokies this coming weekend and move on to face Notre Dame in week number 11. Another intriguing battle is an SEC clash. It's Alabama, it's LSU. It doesn't get better than this. Alabama since 2011 is 6-0 over the LSU Tigers and have won those games by 12.8 points per game. You look at the domination by Alabama this year in the SEC. They're 5-0 and have won those games by 39.2 points per game. Both teams are coming off a bye, but I think it benefits LSU in this matchup. If there's one team that doesn't fear Alabama, it is the LSU Tigers. You look at this ball game last year in Baton Rouge. It was a 3-point game much of the way before in the last 5 minutes, Jalen Hurts ran off a 30-yard touchdown run to break that game wide open, and Alabama won that ball game 10-0. They now come back home to Tuscaloosa. This is an LSU offense that's averaging 216 rushing yards on the ground. They're passing for 201 yards through the air. They do have a senior quarterback in Danny Etling. He's completing 60% of his passes, 1,452 yards, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. You look at the last 3 games by this offensive line now against SEC opponents. Ole Miss, Auburn, Florida. LSU is averaging 255 rushing yards on the ground. They're coming off a 393-yard rushing performance against the Ole Miss Rebels. But I really like the play calling of Matt Canada. He's been more aggressive on first and second downs. I think that'll factor into this ball game. When you look at LSU's defense as a whole, I think that's the matchup you want to watch this coming Saturday against Jalen Hurts. This game is more about LSU than it is Alabama. LSU is allowing only 173 passing yards per game. You look at the last 4 games now, they've only allowed 1 passing touchdown. On the year, LSU's only allowed 5 passing touchdowns all season long. You look at the last 3 games in terms of third down conversions, they've held opponents to 8 of 35 on third downs. That's 21%. I think they could force Jalen Hurts into long third down conversions, force him in the pocket. And when you look at this defense in terms of sack total, last 3 games now against Ole Miss, Auburn, Florida, they have 11 total sacks on the year. They enter this ball game with 26 sacks as a defensive unit. Arden Key looks like he's getting back to 2016 form. I'm calling for the outright victory. LSU 24, Alabama 21. It is the first week in November. Crazy things happen, and I like the way LSU's playing. I think they're playing with house money. Look for Ed Ogeron, both Dave Aranda and Matt Canada to be very aggressive in this ball game, and LSU does strike the upset 24-21 over the top-ranked Alabama Crimson Tide this coming Saturday. Another intriguing battle is West Virginia and Iowa State. I've been all over Iowa State this year. Love the job that Matt Campbell's done. They're 6-2 overall, coming off a very impressive home win over TCU in Ames, 14-7. They really held Kenny Hill and TCU's offense in check. They forced turnovers last week and were able to score off their turnovers. Red zone defense was lights out. You look at West Virginia, they struggled against Oklahoma State. I picked Oklahoma State last week. They didn't disappoint as well. Will Grier did have a disappointing day, only 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. You look at this matchup in terms of a series perspective. The last 3 games now, West Virginia's 3-0 over Iowa State and have won those games by 22.3 points per game. This is a prolific offense in West Virginia. Will Grier is completing 63% of his passes, over 2,400 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But this is more about Iowa State's offense and, more importantly, defense on the road. You look at Iowa State this year, Kyle Kemp, their quarterback, he's playing well within the system. He's completing 66% of his passes, 859 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And you look at the rushing offense of Iowa State. Over the last 5 games now, it's been inconsistent in terms of a rushing attack with David Montgomery. Against games against Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas Tech, and TCU, Iowa State's only averaging 91.6 rushing yards per game. You look at the defense of Iowa State heading into this ball game. Love what they do in terms of run support. They're rock solid, holding opposing offenses to right in the area of about 114 rushing yards per game, and they're plus 10 in turnover margin heading into this ball game. But they have allowed 220 passing yards to opposing offenses, and on the road this year, it's 274 passing yards per game. You look at third down defense for Iowa State heading into this road game, they're allowing opposing offenses to convert 42% of third downs, going up against a dynamic quarterback in Will Grier. I look for West Virginia to score first and put the pressure on Kyle Kemp to match them score for score, and I think that's where Iowa State is at a significant disadvantage. I think in order for Iowa State to win this ballgame, they got to get into a low-scoring game and dictate the tempo. I don't know if they can do that on the road in Morgantown. I like West Virginia here. I think they do pick up a convincing 36-23 win over Iowa State. They snap the Cinderella season and give Iowa State their third loss on the year. That's not to take away what Matt Campbell's done. I just think this is a bad matchup for Iowa State in this ballgame. Another intriguing battle is Wake Forest and Notre Dame. I've been dead wrong picking against Notre Dame all season long, but I think I have a good feel here against Wake Forest in this coming Saturday. Reason why I like Wake Forest in this ballgame is Notre Dame does have Miami on deck. We've seen teams now in back-to-back weeks. We saw Michigan State struggle on the road in Evanston against Northwestern with Penn State on deck, and we saw TCU struggle on the road in Ames against Iowa State with Texas on deck. I know Notre Dame is at home, but they're coming off an emotional back-to-back games against USC and NC State, a physical team. They now face another physical team in Wake Forest. This is a blue-collar team that did pick up a 42-32 win over Louisville. Defensively, they held the Cardinals to 191 rushing yards on the ground. More importantly, they did allow a 55-yard touchdown with 55 seconds left to Lamar Jackson. They held him in check much of the way on the ground, so they understand how to play against a mobile quarterback in Brandon Wimbush this coming Saturday. You look at Wake Forest's offense last week, they put up 621 total yards against Louisville's defense. Their quarterback, John Wolford, broke out for 461 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. His receiver, Greg Dortch, did have 10 total receptions, 167 yards, and 4 touchdowns. You look at the 3 losses by Wake Forest against the better teams in the ACC this year. Florida State, when they played them, wasn't as bad as they are now. Clemson and Georgia Tech, they lost those ball games by 11.6 points per game. You look at the offensive side for Wake Forest in against some of the top teams in the ACC, Louisville, Georgia Tech, and Clemson. They're averaging 302 passing yards per game, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception during that span, and they're going up against a Notre Dame defense that still is giving up 231 passing yards per game. They stepped up against Ryan Finley, but they now face another senior quarterback in John Wolford. Keep in mind, too, that Notre Dame's defensive coordinator was the former defensive coordinator at Wake Forest. Is this the matchup that you want to see play out as well? I know people will say Wake Forest probably is at a disadvantage going up against Dave Elko's defense because he understands personnel. I look at it the other way. I think Wake Forest has the advantage here going up against Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame wins, but I think it's a close ball game. 34-30. Notre Dame picks up a close victory. They have Miami on deck. I think they eke past the Demon Deacons in this matchup. Look for Wake Forest to keep this game very, very close this coming Saturday. Another underdog I like, they're on the road. It's BYU. They're coming off a convincing victory over San Jose State. They finally were able to run the football. They rushed for over 200 yards. You look at their quarterback, Tanner Mangum. He passed for 283 yards last week. They seem to have some offensive balance. Now they go on the road to face Fresno State. That's coming off a disappointing loss to UNLV. They allowed 173 rushing yards on the ground. Fresno State is 5-3 overall. I think they've overexceeded expectations at this point. They've come off now back-to-back games against San Diego State and UNLV. They beat San Diego State. They lost to UNLV. But these are both blue-collar teams that like to run the football. You look at San Diego State was able to rush for 169 yards on the ground. You look at UNLV, they did rush for 173 yards against Fresno State. They now face an older team in BYU that at this point in the season, 2-7, really is just playing out the string. But I think they match up very well against Fresno State. I'm not sold on Fresno State being this elite team in the Mountain West Conference. I think they come back to earth, and I think BYU and Tanner Mangum keeps this game very close. I even think they might get the victory. 33-30. BYU does get the road win over the Bulldogs this coming weekend. A lot of pressure on Fresno State as well. They're a young team. They're looking to become bowl eligible. They struggled last week. They now face an older team in BYU, and they're given a lot of points I like BYU to get the road victory this coming weekend. Another intriguing battle, Nebraska, Northwestern. I picked Northwestern last week. They didn't disappoint, 39-31 over Michigan State. They're playing rock-solid rush defense entering this ballgame. Northwestern is only allowing 118 rushing yards on the ground over the last 5 games now. Bowling Green, Penn State, Wisconsin, Maryland, Iowa, Michigan State. This Northwestern defense is allowing 94.8 rushing yards per game. They broke out last week. They held Michigan State in check to 95 rushing yards per game. That's a dominant home effort. They now go on the road to face Nebraska. This is an inconsistent Nebraska team. You look at their third downs over the last couple of weeks. They've converted 12 of 34 third downs. That's right in the area of 32%. They're going up against a rock-solid defense in Northwestern, and more importantly, a quarterback in Clayton Thorson that did complete 34 of 50 passes, 368 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions against a very solid Michigan State defense. I think this is a hot team. They're 5-3 overall, and I think they're playing with house money here. I just think Pat Fitzgerald has a pulse on his team. I think they're more physical on the offense and defensive lines. Look for Justin Jackson to get going, and look for Northwestern to continue the momentum. I like the way they're playing. I feel that they get a high-scoring victory, 34-27 over Nebraska this coming weekend. Just think that the Wildcats are starting to hit stride at just the right point in the season, and I'm not sold on Mike Riley and the inconsistency of Nebraska. Northwestern does pick up a victory this coming weekend. Follow the radio show and TV show every Saturday morning, 9 to 12 Eastern a.m., 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific. Fantasy Sports Radio Network and Television Network, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Dish Network, Channel 262. We'll see you there. College football is great. I just love talking about it. Have a great weekend, everyone.